welcome to Corso Systems Tech Talks Episode 2. I'm Alex Marcy, the founder and president of Corso Systems. After we had a deep dive into security on a couple projects last week, this episode is going to dig into the topic of SSL certificates and how they can be used with Ignition to secure a manufacturing SCADA system. If you go to just about any website and look at your address bar, you'll see a lock icon indicating this site is using HTTPS. Basically, this means the site is using a certificate to validate itself as authentic and secure. This is important, especially for sites that use credit card or other personal information, as the data on an HTTPS connection is encrypted. Since most of the websites you visit on a daily basis use certificates, why is it uncommon to see the lock on an Ignition gateway, or most SCADA systems for that matter? There's really a few reasons why SCADA systems don't use certificates or HTTPS. The first is that it's not always up to modern standards, and the SCADA system software itself doesn't necessarily support using certificates in the first place. The second reason, and the reason that most software isn't up to modern standards, is security through obscurity is the norm in manufacturing, thinking if people can't see or access your network, then it's secure to begin with. As we get into IIoT and connecting different systems to one another and integrating business intelligence systems across an organization, obscurity is no longer the norm in manufacturing. So this is something that you need to have modern SCADA systems to address. And finally, it can be costly both in terms of dollars and in terms of educational resources, understanding how to use certificates in the first place, how to get them and apply them to your system. And also, it's costly to instill security as a cultural norm at a company if that's not the case to begin with. Luckily, with Ignition, we solve the first reason of SCADA systems not being up to modern standards, as Ignition supports SSL out of the box. It can connect to any system out there, databases, other software, APIs, you name it. So it's very important to have security and certificates available on an Ignition system. And to solve the last item, we're going to use a certificate authority called Let's Encrypt, which provides free SSL security certificates using their certificate authority framework to give us a trusted security certificate that we can apply to our Ignition gateway. So let's dive into what is a certificate in the first place. At the most basic level, certificates are a set of keys that let computers encrypt and decrypt messages so that they can communicate with one another securely. This is no different than sending a note in class, and you could write the note in whatever your preferred language is, pass it to the student next to you, and have them pass it along all the different rows to somebody on the other side of the room. But if anybody wanted to read the message, they simply need to open up the piece of paper and look at it. This would be like using a standard HTTP connection without an SSL certificate. Using SSL certificates, the note passing process would be a little bit more complicated. It would be akin to having a lock that you have a key to and passing out locks to the person that you want to send a message to. And they would in turn give you a lock that they have a key to. And when you want to send a message to each other, you would write your message, put it in a lock with their lock on it, put one of your locks in the box so they can send you a message back. You would pass the box along the way. Nobody without the key to that lock, if nobody else in class has the key, they can't open the box and see what's going on. When the box gets to its destination, they unlock their lock with a key, they read the message, they lock it with your lock, and they pass it back. This is basically what's happening. We'll post a link in the description below with a video that describes how this works. In reality, the way it works is a little bit more complicated. Basically, you would access a server with your client. In this case, say you're opening the Ignition gateway in a browser. Your computer would send over information about itself to the gateway, saying that you're requesting a connection. The server would then respond to that with information including its public key, which is then tied to a certificate authority that you can communicate with as the client and validate if it's a valid certificate or not. If it isn't a valid certificate, you would get an alert from the certificate authority that it's not valid, and you could drop the connection. And this would be if you're trying to access something that's not secure, and you'll get an alert on Google Chrome or something. And then you can click advanced and access it anyway or proceed back to safety. If everything is okay, then you would communicate back to the server with a session key that you've generated, and then included with that will be the server's public key. And then the server can take its public key and the session key along with the private key that exists on the server only, and that will be able to decrypt the messages that you're sending it. The server will send back the session key that you've set up with your private keys, and you'll be able to decrypt the messages coming back from the server. Basically, there's a handshake process at the beginning, which sets up this session key and validates the certificate's existence against a certificate authority. And then once that handshake is made and everything is hunky-dory, you'll use a session key from that point forward. Essentially, this ensures that certificate authorities manage the overall certificates for the internet. So there's basically a trusted group of people and companies that generate and maintain these certificates. So the entire internet doesn't need to deal with this. Maybe in the future we could get into something with blockchain or something similar to that with the cryptography available to have like a more distributed certificate. But the way it's set up now is uses certificate authorities. In a lot of cases, this can be a somewhat costly venture, depending on how many certificates you need, how many domain names you're using, how many different servers you have, etc. But that's where something like Let's Encrypt comes in, which is a free, automated, and open certificate authority that is run for the public's benefit and is a service provided by the Internet Security Research Group. Basically, that means that Let's Encrypt will generate certificates, allow you to validate against them, and act as the certificate authority that basically you can use for free. They're in use by many websites, and they're generally promoted by Inductive Automation as a good option for manufacturing, as some of the limitations that they have, really don't apply in the manufacturing world because you're going to use very few domains, and you don't necessarily need to get into things like a wildcard certificate to cover any domain or subdomain that you're using. They also expire after 90 days, which means that you'll either need to renew them manually every 90 days or set up an automated system to handle that for you. But we think that using certificates, well outweighs the slight inconvenience of having to renew the certificates, especially since we can automate this. And using Let's Encrypt allows us to do that at zero cost, minus some time to get the certificate set up every quarter. And then we can use Let's Encrypt with our Ignition Gateway. We'll link to the blog post in the description below on our website that describes how to do this. But basically, there's a process you can go through that's well documented to get a certificate, challenge your gateway to make sure that you have ownership of the domain that you're trying to use, and then set the certificate up on your gateway and enable SSL on the gateway itself to allow encrypted connections to the gateway. We hope that was helpful. Describing how SSL works, we'll have some links in the description below to some more detailed information on how SSL works. And if you have any questions, comments, or ideas on things that you would like to see in future Tech Talks episodes, or need help setting up Ignition with an SSL certificate with Let's Encrypt, feel free to reach out to us. We're available any time of day at corsosystems.com.